Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good day to Dr. Kausar and also to our fellow friends. My name is Amirah Syuhada Binti Shahruddin, and we are from Group 1. We'll be presenting about Native Americans' way of life, cultures, and also resistance to settler colonialism. So first of all, I am going to introduce to you who are these Native Americans. Basically, according to Cambridge English Dictionary, Native Americans can be defined as a member of one of the groups of people who were living in North and the South of America before Europeans arrived. They also can be called as American Indian, Indigenous American, Aboriginal American Indian, Amerindian, American, and First Nation person. Wow, there's a lot of names, but basically they can be called as the Native Americans. It was said that back then, in the Ice Age period, the earliest descendant of Native American came across from Asia to Alaska through the Bering Land Bridge. As you can see in the slides, the maps of that show the Bering Land Bridge, and also I have my own globe here. So this is the Asia continent, while this is the America continent. So back then, they said that there was a land bridge between these two continents, and Native Americans came from this Asia continent to the American continent through this Bering Land Bridge. Well, that's really interesting, you know. Native American, they usually live in groups or tribes based on the places that they live and also based on their cultures that they practice. There were hundreds of tribes that lived throughout the continent. Anthropologists, because there were so many tribes, anthropologists or geographers usually divided the group of Native Americans according to their cultural areas in the whole continent. So they group the people or the tribes according to their geographical location and also to their similar characteristics and cultures that the tribes practice. Well, generally the researcher focused on 10 important cultural areas. Moving on, now I will be talking about their cultures, specifically their cultures according to the cultural areas. The first one is the Arctic. The region is located near the Arctic Circle in Alaska, Greenland, and Canada, and the tribes that live there were the Inuit and also the Aleut. And Inuit, for example, usually are nomadic, while the Aleut live in small fishing villages, and they live in a dome-shaped house. You know, we call it as igloos, like you can see in the picture, the dome-shaped house. While the second one is the subarctic. Okay, the subarctic is located in swampy region inland of Alaska and Canada. In the western area, the tribes that live there were the Athabascan speakers tribe, while in the eastern area was the Algonquin speakers. So they usually live in a small family groups in small movable tents. Okay, the next one is the northeast. It was located near the Atlantic coast towards the North Carolina and Mississippi River Valley, and it was dominated by Iroquoian-speaking tribes and also the Algonquin-speaking tribes. And they usually live in small fishing and farmer villages. And they also have clans that name of the animals. Well, that's interesting. Fourth one is the southeast. So southeast cultural areas was located in the south of the northeast area and near the north of the Gulf of Mexico. So it was a farming communities, and they also usually harvested lots of crops, and also there were some of the famous tribes that was called the five civilized tribes, consists of Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Cray, and Seminole. So in the picture, you can see the members of the Seminole tribes, and the second one is the Cherokee tribes that was ready for the green corn dance. Now the fifth culture areas, which is the plains. The plains located in the Race Prairies region in Canada, way to the central United States and into Texas. There are various tribes that live here that use different languages. Some of the famous tribes such as the Comanche, Crow, and Arapaho. Some of the tribes were hunters, while some others were farmers, but basically they are known for their skilled horsemanship and also known as the master rider and strong warriors. Okay, now we have gone through half of the culture areas. Well, I know there's a lot. So now the sixth culture area, which is the Southwest. Okay, Southwest is located in the desert region in Arizona and New Mexico, and the tribes, most of them live as farmers in permanent settlements in house called pueblos, as you can see in the picture. So they're also famously known for their jewelries, and like I said before, most of them are farmers, but except for Navajo and Apache tribes, because they are nomadic and mostly are hunters. So this is the six culture areas. Now moving on to the seven culture areas that located at the intermittent deserts in areas near Nevada, Utah, Colorado, and many other regions. It was a big area, and the tribes are usually nomadic, and they live in wickiups made by willow poles or in teepees. And the eighth culture area is the Plateau. So Plateau located in Columbia and Fraser River basins, also the intersection of five culture areas. So generally the tribes live in fishing villages, in permanent settlements, and some tribes also become hunters after some time, and they were famously known for their innovation capabilities, technologies, and also their breeding animals. The Appaloosa horse, as you can see in the picture of the Appaloosa horse. So now we are down to the last two. The second last culture area is the Northwest Coast. The tribes live alongside the Pacific Ocean from British Columbia to the Northern California. There was an abundance of natural sources and food. There's a lot of food there, and that led to highly stratified and sophisticated societies. While in California, the last one is California. Congratulations, you made it this far. It was located in present-day California. It was a highly diverse and populated area. There are more than 300,000 natives that live there. So they live within the tribal systems and mostly were hunters and gatherers. Those are our 10 cultural areas. But wait, that's not the end yet, because in our presentation, we will also talk about three specific tribes as example. The first one is the Cherokee, a group of southeastern Indians that live in the southeastern, while the second one is the Powhatan, a group of eastern woodland Indians that live in the central plain of Virginia, and the third one is the Comanche, the Native American nation of the Great Plains. Okay, so I will explain about their culture. First and foremost is the Cherokee. For the language, Cherokee has their own language system that was developed by Khairiah in 1821. As for the religion, they believe in spirits, and their main god or their main great spirit is called as Unitlantree. And also, sacred fire is one of their most important religion elements. While for ceremonies, Cherokee commonly celebrated 6 ceremonies, such as the new moon of the spring ceremony and the green corn ceremony. And for the arts and crafts, Cherokee warriors usually are heavily tattooed all over their bodies, and also all those people, the Cherokee people, usually covered in beading clothes and beautiful bead headpieces. Next, for the Powhatan tribes use the Algonquian language, the common language in their areas, while for the arts and crafts, Powhatan usually painted and tattooed their bodies with abstract designs, and also their clothing usually made from animal skin and fur. And for the religion, they worship a hierarchy of gods and spirits, mainly two major gods, Sohany, the god created, and also the evil spirit. As for the ceremonies, Powhatan also have some rituals and sacrifices related to their religion, and also they have other ceremonies which they celebrate it with dances and songs. And last but not least, the Comanche tribes. So the Comanche spoke in Shoshone or Auto-Aztecan language. As for their arts and craft, they usually wear clothes from deer and also buffalo skin. And usually both women and men, they have the two long breasts. And for the religion, they believe in animism. And also they believe in Manito. They worship Manito as their great spirit or their main god. And for the ceremonies, they also have ceremonies like the Sweat Lodge ceremony and also the Sundance ceremonies. So that's all from me. Do you feel more curious to know about these Native Americans or about their tribes? Well, now I will pass the floor to my friend Khairiah to talk about their ways of life.
Assalamualaikum, I am Khairiah and my mentor number is 1817482. I will proceed this presentation on the way of life of Native Americans. In general, Native Americans live in harmony with nature and they did not exploit or abuse the environment except if it were for survival purposes. As for their political system, the task of governing rely heavily on cultural kinship custom and the consensus of the community. Most of the Native American tribes had clans, which most of them were matrilineal and few were patrilineal. Now I will explain on political, economic, and social aspects that focus on three tribes, which is Cherokee, Powhatan, and Comanche. I will begin with the political aspect. So the first tribe is Cherokee. Cherokee used democratic ruling among the people, which organized by each village. Each Cherokee village was autonomous and operated in two forms of governing bodies known as the white and the red government. The white government that was led by the peace chief known as Beloved Man, and he ruled during the times of peace, which he dealt with domestic issues and ceremonies. Meanwhile, the red government was in charge with the war matter, and they consist of the Great War Chief, the Great War Chief's seconds, 7 war counselor, the war woman, the chief war speakers, messengers, ceremonial officers, and Scots. Next is Powhatan tribe. Powhatan ruled through a combination of customary law and his own commands. He and his chiefs enforced their order with the assistance of trusted priests and counselors. For those who disobey, punishment could be severe, such as burning to death for major offences. Meanwhile, for minor offences, they will face less severe punishment, such as beating. Powhatan is the supreme chief and he dominated the government. All villages in the same region belonged to one tribe, and each tribe had its own chief called Werowance, the male, and Werowance called the female. And villages within a tribe had their own leader who answered to the tribal chiefs. Next is Comanche tribe. The political structure of Comanche is loosely organized. They live in many separate divisions that work together but later become antagonistic at some time, and division began to break down into individual bands. For Comanche, it was not necessarily for them to elect a leader except during the wartime. Moving on to the economic aspect, generally all three of these tribes involve in farming, hunting, and gathering. To add on, they also involve in trading activities. As an example, Cherokee tribes involve in creation of clothing, decoration, basket, pottery, tools, and weapons, and all these items will be traded, often over long distances. As for Powhatan, they made fishing equipment, built canoes, and made stone tools to supply as their hunting equipment. Meanwhile, for Comanche, they bartered horses and the products of the hunt with neighboring peoples for manufactured items and agricultural products. Next, I will continue on the social aspect. The Cherokee are traditionally a matrilineal kinship society in which property and social status have descended through the woman's line. To traditional Cherokee, a child is considered born into their mother's family and clan. Cherokee had 7 clans and they were not allowed to marry inside their clans, and the women of Cherokee were responsible for the house farming and the family, while the men were responsible for hunting and war. In the Powhatan society, kingship was inherited through the female line, and the Powhatan people lived in society rank of rulers, skilled warriors, priests, and commoners. Chiefs inherited their position from their mother, and they were also granted rank to skilled warrior or hunter. Priests were men of power, and they often had great influence over the chiefs. A man was hunter and warrior, and they also were allowed to have many wives as they could afford. Meanwhile, women cooked meals, took care of the child, and grew crops. As for the Comanche, the kingship was bilateral, which mother sides and father sides are equally important to stabilize the kingship and ownership system. The Comanche were nomadic tribe. They will travel when the buffalo did or when their horses need a fresh grass patch. As with most tribes of the times, the Comanche men were in charge of hunting and war, while the women were busy at home cooking, gardening, tending to their child, and setting up the camps for their families.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Hasmiza, and I will proceed and begin my presentation on the resistance of Native Americans to settler colonialism. So before I talk about specific resistance by the three tribes that we have chosen, I will assess and give you guys a general overview on the response of Native Americans towards colonialism. So, the Europeans' foothold on Native Americans' land brought many responses by the Indians, be it politically, economically, as well as socially. So, their responses could be elucidated from cooperation to outrage and displeasure. Native Americans had complicated relationship with European settlers, so they resisted the efforts of the Europeans to gain more of their lands and control through both warfare and diplomacy. In addition, the Indians also were forced to choose sides. In my point of view, the Indians were negatively impacted no matter which side they fought on, due to the fact that their number, or the number of Native Americans population, had shrunk in size and territories by the end of 19th century. So this was a result when they were left out of peace talks and they lost additional lands which they were forced to relocate to a specific area under the Indian Removal Act of 1830. Alright, moving on to the first tribe, which is Cherokee. I found out that this particular Cherokee's resistance towards the colonies was very interesting, which was the Battle of the Bluffs on April 2nd, 1781. So this raid was carefully planned by Jardine Cano and the Chickamauga. Chief Jardine Cano, Chickamauga Creeks, and others attacked Fort Nashbrook, where it was estimated about 5 settlers and 2 were wounded. So when the settlers went off their horses to counterattack, the Indians stampeded their horses, and the Indians were initially able to dispel the majority of the fort's men until the dogs inside the forts were released, and the dogs started to attack the Indians. Meanwhile, the settlers and the fortsmen were able to enter the fort again. So some of the Indians were shot by the fortsmen as the dogs were attacking them, and later the Indians retreated and they returned to their homes with the settlers' horses. I think they were able to get about 19 horses, and of course this battle or raid was one of several battles aimed at putting an end to the American occupation of Middle Tennessee. Next, the most important event happened, which involves the Indians, was the Trail of Tears. So this event happened as a result of the agreement of the Treaty of Holston in 1791, where it was signed between the Cherokees and the United States government. So this treaty resulted in which the Cherokee giving up their land, and it also was the recognition of the Cherokee security from the US, and peace between these two parties was also established, along with trading activities that will be controlled by the US. Apart from that, in 1830, the Indian Removal Act was signed by President Andrew Jackson, which sanctioned and He sanctioned the federal government to relocate the natives to the unsettled land west of the Mississippi River. So this Indian territory was located in present-day Oklahoma, where they migrated through 9 states. So along the Trail of Tears, the Indians had a tough time surviving, where there were many deaths that took place as they were haunted by deadly diseases like cholera, typhus, famine, as well as poor sanitation. The last Cherokee that completed the Trail of Tears was in March 1839, and it was recorded about 4,000 out of 15,000 Cherokee people died on their way to the western lands. So this quote showed that Reverend Daniel Patrick, who was a missionary who ministers in the Cherokee territory, condemned this migration. So this is a mural by Elizabeth Jans depicting the arrival of the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma in 1830s. Next, moving on with the resistance from Powhatan tribes, which was the first Anglo-Powhatan War that occurred from 1609 until 1614. So by just looking at the name of the war, we know that this war involves the Powhatan Confederacy against the English colonies of Virginia or Jamestown colony. So this war erupted considering the fact when Lord de la War's orders to George Percy on August 9, 1610, when Percy and 40 men killed or injured 50 or more people, and they captured a wife of Warwin Chopanch and the children. So after returning to the boat, the Englishmen killed the women and children by throwing them overboard and shooting them in the water. So the massacre of women and children was not tolerable in Powhatan warfare, and it greatly affected Powhatan and his people. Then a series of raids and counter-raids took place during this war. As such, an event where Pocahontas who was the daughter of Powhatan, where she was kidnapped by Captain Samuel Argall, which he held for ransom, first at Jamestown and later at Dale's colony of Henricus. This event resulted in an immediate ceasefire by Powhatan, and in April 1614, Pocahontas married John Rolfe at Jamestown, and at the end, the first Powhatan War was brought to a close. So apart from that, this was the first Virginia interracial union that contributed to an improved relationship between the Indians and the colonies. So in my opinion, their continuous defeat of the tribes and intermarriage between Pocahontas and John resulted in the extinction or the downfall of the natives' languages, their culture, their religion, beliefs, and ceremonies of the conquered people. Last is about the resistance by the Comanche tribe, specifically in the Comanche raids of 1840. So this event was a result of the Council House fight in March 1840, when the Texans killed 12 Comanche chiefs after them violating the peace delegation. So as a sign of revenge, Buffalo Hump led a great raid on August 6 as the Comanches drifted from West Texas beyond the Edwards Plateau to the Texas coast cities of Victoria and Linville. So during this event, the Comanches raided and surrounded, as well as they looted the area where they burned the cities at their will. So they captured more than 1,500 horses, but their victory was short-lived when they were intercepted by Texan forces under Felix Houston and Edward Burleson on August 12. So consequently, the Comanches were defeated, but they were able to run away with the stolen horses and mules after being able to kill as many of their captives as possible, where many of their captives were found tied to trees and shot with arrows. So this is a painting during the Battle of Plum Creek between the Comanche and the Texas Rangers. So I will give the floor to Khairiah for the conclusion.
Before I conclude the presentation, I will touch on the legacy of Native Americans. Like other Americans, Native Americans want to contribute to the betterment of America without having to give away any more land or other natural resources. They want to preserve their rights to govern themselves and preserve their valued tradition and their distinct identity as the first American. So there were some events that marked their existence and identity, such as President of America approved a joint resolution that designating November 1990 as Native American Heritage Month, which means in November November is a Native American Heritage Month. And in 1992, Berkeley, California became the first city to rename Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day. There is also a ceremony known as a powwow ceremony, which is a Native American social meeting or cultural celebration where people from various indigenous nations come together to dance, sing, and honor their ancestral traditions. This ceremony is a significant opportunity for them to act out their ancient stories handed down through the generations, exemplifying the strength and vitality of their legacy and keeping their history alive. To sum up, the Native American tribe do contribute to the advance of civilization, but their contributions remain little appreciated. At the same time, their true nature is often romanticized and their societal structures are being ignored. Hence, it is really important to understand about Native Americans as their history has never been told accurately and most people are unaware of their existence and status in this present day. So I think that's all from our group. Thank you for your attention.